Hi, teachers. I am Kate DeMio, literacy consultant from Lake Orion Community Schools. Today, I would like to take you on a little tour of some of the assessments that are included with the Teachers College Reading and Writing Project, Reading, Writing, and Phonics Units of Study. Additionally, I'd like you to have a sneak peek at the new Teachers College website and look at the assessment materials that are available there. The bulk of our time will be spent taking a look at some of the tools that come with the units and how we can use them for assessment. Let's look at the Heinemann website and the Teachers College website and unpack what assessment tools are already there. So right now I'm in the Heinemann online resources for phonics. And if you go down here to general information or to resources across the grade, you'll find a couple of the different assessments located right here. One thing that's a little frustrating about the phonics units of study that I want to put you kind of on guard for is that the rest of the phonics assessments are only located in the Guide to the Phonics Units of Study book. They're not located in the online resources. You'll want to check back to these resources often because one of the things we find is as errors are found or as additional assessments are created, these are updated. If we go to the reading units of study and we go to assessment tools, you'll find a variety of assessments available. One of the things that always shocks me is how often I create an assessment and then start looking around on the Heinemann website and find that Teachers College already had one. The other thing that you'll find in these materials is you'll find black and white versions of all of the charts. And the only reason I'm bringing this up is because we'll be using some of this later in today's session. And I wanted to show you how I make one. So you just, when you go to print, make sure that you select multiple pages. And then that's how you'll be able to create the black and white charts that I'll be using later in the session. Okay. Additionally, when you're in a reading unit, if you scroll all the way to the bottom, you'll find a read aloud section. And again, you can find some black and white read aloud prompts, which we'll be using in today's session. So finally, we could go to the writing units of study. And again, I'm on the Heinemann website, and I'm going to go into the Writing Pathways book. There's a lot of really cool things here that you may not have realized. So first of all, the illustrated checklists are located in the online resources. These are not available in the Writing Pathways book. If you scroll to the bottom of this writing section, you'll also find an assessment for second grade on writing about reading. You'll also find a learning progression, K-5. This particular learning progression is super cool because it's about the writing process. So it's about generating ideas and drafting and actually lays out for you expectations for kids at different points in the year. So these are the Heinemann resources. And again, you'll want to visit those frequently. Now, in addition to the online resources at Heinemann, you can also visit the Teachers College website. When you're on the Teachers College website, you go to Resources and Resource Catalog. You'll get all of these different choices. And I just wanted to show you a couple of really cool things. If you go to Virtual Writing Performance Assessments, you can find some brand new tools. These tools are designed to be used with the on-demand assessments. These are the ones for kindergarten. Okay. And again, these are brand new, not even available a year ago. So if you haven't seen them yet, that's why. There's also a video in case you wanted to push out the on-demand and wanted a video to be able to do that. So those are some really cool things. If we go back to the resource catalog and we go to running records, we not only get the benchmarking writing records that Teachers College has created, we also get this in-book assessment. The in-book assessment is so nice because it can be used with any book that you're doing a running record on. So again, we visited Heinemann and we visited the Teachers College Reading and Writing Project website, unpacking what assessment tools are available in those locations. Let's look at some ways that the chart can be used as an assessment tool. So this chart is a black and white version of the chart. I printed multiple copies per page. Then I attach this chart to a clipboard and use it during my conferring as a way to keep track of the names of the kids who need support with a particular skill. This box indicates that I'm ready to do a small group with those students. You'll also notice I have a little star on here. That's because I've invited Cami, who's really, really good at this skill, to teach a small group using this particular Post-it. I've also used the chart as a guide during conferring. When you ask the kids to tell you something they're good at, I let them look at this chart, identifying something that they're really strong at. And then I ask, and of the things on this chart, what's something you might want to work on? Because one of the things you often notice with little kids is that when you say, what do you want to work on? They often say, I don't know, or reading faster, right? And this will offer a little bit more variety. Also sort of attached to conferring with the chart, oftentimes I give kids the chart piece and we use some what's called washi tape. We attach it to the top of the book. And then I ask them to pay attention to how often they're doing that work inside of their book and to make just a little tally mark on top of the Post-it, showing that they're really paying attention and being held accountable for the work. And then finally, most often I use these during partnership. I have a little set of cards. I keep them like in a Band-Aid box, right? And these are all the chart pieces for this particular unit. And frequently I give kids time to sort those into yes, I can and not quite yet. And one of the things I love about this activity is if you plan it several times during the unit, what you can see kids do is start to move things from the not yet to the yes, I can pile. These are just some of the ways that you might be able to think about using a chart as an assessment tool. Now we can also use the checklist as an assessment tool. Really, we can think about it in many of the same ways. So if we're going to use the checklist, we could certainly write names of students in this space and use it to form small groups. We could have kids maybe mark with a heart sticker something they're really good at, maybe highlight something that they want to get better at. We can cut out the pieces and put them in a similar container and have kids sort what they're good at and what they're still working on. We can also do some new things with the checklist. So one of the things that I think is really important with the checklist is that while sometimes the language feels over the kid's head, it's important to do things to bring that language into their regular vocabulary. So rather than changing the language, I actually change the amount of the checklist that they're looking at one time. So this is just the elaboration section. And I've used this with a small group where we go over each of the parts of the elaboration section. Then I use a mentor text downloaded from the Heinemann website. And I have kids work with me to evaluate this piece of writing. So often it's easier to look at somebody else's writing rather than to look at your own. And the kids debate and discuss where we would place the students' work. One of the things like they love about this is the fact that it's like a mini version. Then they flip this over and go into their own work to do a self-assessment. But what's nice is then they have this little mini version to keep kind of doing some comparing against. I've also had kids look at their own writing and select something from the checklist that they're most proud of, rewriting that on a sentence strip for a hallway display. And still one more idea with the checklist is to pull out just a small part of the checklist, not even a whole section, but just one line of the checklist, and to study student mentor text, thinking about how this child did with that particular skill, and then having the kids do that work in their own. For this particular piece, I've used this as a share together whole group with the class. So you've seen me use mentor text in a couple of different ways. I want to show you just a couple more ways that I've used those mentor texts. So one thing I've done is work with students, this is second graders, worked with them to say, what did this author do that was really, really good in this paper? And then we create just a couple little Post-it notes of things that kids do. And then when children are doing their own writing, they can pick these Post-it notes up and put them on their writing to show that they've accomplished that same thing. Again, this just works a little bit toward increasing student accountability. Here's another version. This one was created with a small group, and then we just made copies of it. And every student that was in the small group then had this as like a personalized checklist. And still one more tool that can be really effective for data collection and assessment. This comes from the If and Then book. Each grade level has one for writing. And in the back of that book, there are these conferring scenarios. This particular one is for narrative writing, but there's also one for informational writing, and there's one for opinion writing. And again, you can write student names, kids that need to be in a particular group. One thing that's really great about this is they're grade specific. So the story lacks focus is a common problem with second graders. So it's probably a place where you'll want a small group. And then as an added bonus, this actually kind of gives you the lesson plan for doing that small group. We can also think of the learning progressions as a possible tool. Now, while these macro progressions are really for teachers, I think they can become particularly helpful when we're trying to think about how to get kids to move along the progression. So for example, sometimes, like I'll read first grades, it says, the writer put the picture from his mind on the page. He had details in pictures and words. Well, that's a whole lot packed in to one piece. So that might need to be like subdivided into what we're going to call a micro progression. Okay, so a micro progression. Okay, so here's how that might look. Like I go back and I'm looking here at the kindergarten and it says they told who was there and what they did. And I'm like, okay, so maybe at a level 1, they tell who they are and what they did. And then I'm like, well, what's the next thing up? The next thing up would probably be that they show their feelings. And then I'll grab something from first grade. I'll grab that word details. Okay. And then I'm looking, well, then what in second grade is even a little bit harder? It says, bring their characters to life with details, talk, and actions. Details, actions. So I just need to add some dialogue, right? So what I've done is use this macro progression that comes from Teachers College to create a little micro progression that could be used in my classroom. Like give yourself 1 star if you find yourself doing these. Give yourself 2 stars if you've also added these. And then give yourself 3 stars if you have all of these things. Okay, and then I would say, turn and tell your partner. Which are you going to work on? How can you make your piece better? So I'm using the macro progression to design a micro progression that can be used with kids. I don't want you to forget about this book, The Guide to the Reading Workshop. There's a whole chapter. Chapter 4 is completely dedicated to your knowledge of reading development. And one of the things that I like to do with this chapter is I like to reread wherever I find most of my kids. So like maybe in kindergarten right now, you find most of your kids at AB. Or maybe you find most of your kids at CD. What I do is reread that section, and then I create just a little checklist for myself of what are the skills that need to be in place before they're ready to move to the next level. And then the final tool that I'd like to show you when we think about assessment is the read aloud prompts. So your kits come with these read aloud prompts. And all I've done is print the read aloud prompts on one full page. Now, this is what I'm going to do with those. I'm going to use these read aloud prompts in my mentor text, in this case, Superstorms, exactly as the unit directs me. But then I am going to choose some of those post-its to repeat, and I'm going to use the same exact post-its in another text. And then finally, I am going to assess using those post-its. So let me show you how that looks, okay? So here is the list of prompts. And I use these in my Superstorms book. But then I reread them and chose just 3 that I really wanted to focus on in this unit. And one was to preview the text. I want to make sure that the kids can preview the text. And then 2 was to retell key information. I wanted to make sure that the kids could do that. And then finally was to predict the next part of the text. So these 3 post-its, 1, 2, 3, are going to come back. And I'm going to use them in several read alouds throughout my unit, asking those same 3 questions again and again, supporting kids, listening in, coaching them, having small groups when kids aren't successful with those prompts. And then at the end of the unit, I've thought about, so how would kids show success with that question? And how would kids show success with this question? And then the final question. And now I'm able to have my kids turn and talk, lean in, listen. I can ask them during conferring. I can even have kids independently reading at their desks and just go around and check in on these different items. Or, especially with second graders, I might even have them write out their responses. So read aloud prompts can be a really powerful tool when we think about assessment. Wow, we did a lot in a really short period of time. We went to the Heinemann website and took a look at the online resources, reminding ourselves of some of the materials that are there that we may have forgotten about. We visited the new Teachers College website and looked a little closer at some of the assessment materials that are new and available there. We looked at the guide to the reading workshop, exploring ways that materials in that guidebook can be used for assessment. We looked at the if and then conferring book for writing and talked about how we might be able to use that. We talked about the read aloud post-its and ways that they could be used for assessment. We looked at micro progressions and the possibility of making those from the progressions that are in the kit. We talked about using charts as an assessment tool and checklists as an assessment tool and even mentor text as an assessment tool. I hope you'll agree we did a lot in a really short period of time, and that there's so much in your materials that can be used for assessment. It's just a matter of unpacking. Have a great afternoon.